The sun hung merciless over the New Mexico territory, turning the sand into a scorching blanket that shimmered with false promises of water. The year was 1889, and the small town of Copper Ridge sat like a dusty jewel in the crown of nowhere, its train station the only mark of civilization for miles around. The locomotive's whistle had long since faded into memory when Margaret Maggie Whitfield stood alone on the wooden platform, her eastern finery already wilting in the desert heat. She clutched the crumpled telegram in her gloved hand, reading it again though the words had already burned themselves into her mind. "Cannot marry, stop, found local girl, stop, do not come, stop." The porter had unloaded her trunks with practiced efficiency, stacking them like monuments to her foolishness. The other passengers, rough men seeking fortune, weathered women seeking survival, had dispersed into the town or onto waiting wagons. Now only the desert wind kept her company, tugging at her carefully pinned auburn hair. "Ma'am shouldn't be standing alone out here." The voice came from the shadows beneath the platform's overhang. Maggie startled, her hand flying to her chest. A figure emerged, tall, lean, with skin bronzed by sun and heritage. His clothes were a mixture of Apache tradition and frontier necessity, leather leggings. A cotton shirt torn at the shoulder, a red bandana holding back long black hair. "I beg your pardon." Maggie's voice came out steadier than she felt. The man stepped fully into the dying light. His face bore the angular beauty of his people, marred by a scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his jaw. Dark eyes assessed her with the wariness of a wounded animal. "Name's Samuel," he said, the English sitting uncomfortably on his tongue. "Samuel Crow Walking, though most just call me Crow." He gestured toward the horizon where the sun bled crimson. "Desert's no place for Eastern ladies after dark. Wolves, bandits, worse things." Maggie lifted her chin, a gesture of defiance she'd perfected in Boston drawing rooms. "I assure you, Mr. Crow, I am quite capable of managing my own affairs." A bitter smile touched his lips. "Like you managed that marriage promise?" Heat flooded her cheeks. "How dare you!" "Whole station heard you crying over that paper." He nodded toward the telegram, still crushed in her fist. "Man who breaks his word to a woman ain't worth the tears." The unexpected kindness in his voice nearly undid her careful composure. Maggie turned away, blinking hard against the sting in her eyes. "I suppose you think me foolish, coming all this way for a man I'd never met." "Think you're brave." The words were soft, almost lost in the wind. "Or desperate. Sometimes they look the same." She whirled to face him. "And which are you?" For a long moment, they regarded each other, two strangers abandoned by different worlds. The platform beneath them creaked, a lonely sound in the vastness. "Both," Crow admitted. "Military left me here 3 days back. Said I wasn't Apache enough for the reservation, wasn't white enough for the town." He shrugged, the gesture betraying old pain. "Been sleeping under the platform, watching folks come and go. You're the first one who stayed." "I have nowhere to go," Maggie confessed, the words scraping her throat. "I sold everything to buy passage. My family. They said I was dead to them the moment I answered a matrimonial advertisement." The sun slipped lower, painting their shadows long and dark across the weathered boards. In the distance, a coyote howled, the sound raising goosebumps along Maggie's arms despite the lingering heat. "There's a mission," Crow said suddenly. "San Felipe, 2 days' walk through the desert. Padre Antonio takes in strays, Apache orphans, Mexican widows, anyone the world's forgotten." He paused, studying her. "Could take you there. Why would you help me?" "Maybe because we're both ghosts now." His hand unconsciously moved to the scar on his face. "White soldier gave me this when I was 15. Said he was civilizing me. My grandmother used to say the spirits test us with kindness after cruelty. Maybe you're my test." Maggie looked at this strange man, this Apache who spoke of spirits and tests, who offered help when the civilized world had abandoned her. Everything proper society had taught her screamed warnings. But proper society had also promised her a husband who chose another. A family who disowned her for seeking love. "I can pay," she began, but Crow shook his head. "Keep your money. Desert don't take currency anyway." He glanced at her trunks. "Can't bring those. Take what fits in one bag. We leave at first light." "We could leave now." "You ever walked desert at night? Ever had a rattlesnake strike at your shadow? Ever heard what a pack of wild dogs sounds like when they're hunting?" He shook his head. "We sleep here tonight. Platform's safer than the town. They don't much like Apache in the hotel." Maggie looked toward Copper Ridge, where lamplight was beginning to glow in windows. She could try her luck there, perhaps trade her mother's jewelry for a room. But something in Crow's eyes, a mixture of pride and hurt, made her decision. "All right," she said, "but I don't even have a bedroll." "I got blankets, Apache blankets. Might offend your Eastern sensibilities." Despite everything, Maggie found herself almost smiling. "Mr. Crow, my Eastern sensibilities are currently scattered across 2,000 miles of railroad track. I believe I'll survive." As darkness crept across the desert, they prepared their makeshift camp beneath the platform. Crow produced 2 worn blankets and a leather water pouch from his meager possessions. He showed her how to shake out the blankets for scorpions, how to position herself to avoid the worst of the wind. "Why were you at the station?" Maggie asked as they settled into their separate corners. "If the military abandoned you, why stay?" In the darkness, she heard him shift. "Waiting, I suppose, watching people reunion with their families. Stupid?" A pause. "What's your real name, not Whitfield? That's Eastern Protestant stock. You're Catholic." Maggie's hand went unconsciously to the small cross at her throat. "O'Brien. Margaret Mary O'Brien. I changed it for the advertisement. Thought it would improve my chances." "Man rejected Margaret Mary O'Brien," Crow said slowly. "Not Maggie Whitfield. Maybe that's the spirit's mercy." They lapsed into silence. Above them, stars emerged like scattered diamonds on black velvet. The desert night brought cold that seemed impossible after the day's heat. Maggie pulled the Apache blanket tighter, breathing in scents of sage and smoke and something indefinably wild. "Are you really taking me to the mission?" she asked into the darkness. "Or is this some elaborate revenge on white women?" A sound that might have been a laugh. "My mother was half Mexican. Said revenge was like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die." A longer pause. "Besides, you're not my enemy. You're just lost, like me." The platform creaked above them. Somewhere in the desert, that coyote howled again, joined by others until the night filled with their lonely chorus. Maggie shivered, not entirely from cold. "Crow!" Her voice sounded small in the vastness. "Yeah?" She swallowed her pride. Let the words fall into darkness. Will you stay close tonight? I'm frightened." She heard movement, then felt his presence nearer, though still maintaining proper distance. "Apache don't abandon women in the desert," he said. "Sleep. I'll watch." "You need sleep too. Learn to sleep with one eye open at the government school. Useful skill." Maggie closed her eyes, trying to ignore the hard ground beneath her, the strange sounds of the desert night, the absurdity of trusting her life to an Apache stranger. But what choice did she have? Thomas Hartwell had promised her a new life in the territory. A ranch, children, respectability. Instead, she had a train platform and the company of an outcast. "Tell me about the mission," she whispered. "Is it real?" "Real as anything in this land. Padre Antonio's old Spanish blood, from when this was all Mexico. He says God don't see color, just souls. The government hates him. The town tolerates him because he keeps the Apache children from begging in their streets. And he'll take me and an unmarried woman with no connections. He took me in once, when I was running from the school, fed me, hid me, taught me to read from his Bible." Crow's voice held old warmth. "Soldiers came eventually, always do, but he tried." "What happened to your family?" The question escaped before Maggie could stop it. I'm sorry, that's not— Dead. The word fell flat between them. Soldiers came to our camp, said we were hostiles. We were just trying to harvest mezcal like our grandmothers did. His breath shuddered out. I was away, hunting rabbits. Came back to ashes and bodies. Maggie's throat constricted. How old were you? 12 winters. Soldiers took me to the school to civilize me. 5 years of beatings for speaking Apache. 5 years of Christ's love at the end of a switch. The bitterness could have curdled milk. Then they decided I was civilized enough to scout for them, track my own people. When I refused, he touched his scar again. I'm sorry. White people always are, after. They lay in silence, each wrapped in their own darkness. Maggie thought of her comfortable Boston home, her sister's laughter, her mother's rose garden, all sacrificed for the promise of love in a letter. Crow had lost more family, culture, place in the world, yet here he was, offering kindness to a stranger. My father drank himself to death, she said suddenly. After the bank took our store, Mother remarried quickly, a cruel man who had expectations. She pulled the blanket tighter. When I saw the advertisement, it seemed like escape, romance, a new beginning. Beginnings are usually endings wearing disguise. That's very philosophical for a— She caught herself. For a savage. His voice held dark amusement. The priests beat philosophy into us too, right between arithmetic and agriculture. Despite everything, Maggie found herself smiling in the darkness. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. Thought Eastern ladies would melt in desert heat, like sugar in rain. I'm Irish. We're tougher than we look. Good. Desert don't forgive weakness. He shifted, and she heard him checking something, a knife, maybe, or a gun. Try to sleep. Tomorrow's walking will be hard. Day after, harder. What if we don't make it? Then the vultures eat well. He must have sensed her fear because his voice gentled. We'll make it. Survive this long. Both of us. That means something. Maggie closed her eyes again, listening to the desert symphony wind and distant animals and the steady breathing of her unlikely guardian. 2 days to the mission. 2 days through hostile territory with a man she'd been taught to fear. But what waited behind was worse shame, destitution, a return to her stepfather's house. Crow, she whispered one last time. Thank you. He didn't respond, but she sensed his acknowledgement in the darkness, as sleep finally claimed her. Maggie's last coherent thought was that perhaps the spirits Crow spoke of had arranged this meeting. 2 broken people at a desert crossroads, each carrying scars the other might understand. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human suffering, while beneath a train platform in the middle of nowhere, an Irish woman and an Apache man shared the first night of what would become either salvation or destruction. Only the desert knew which, and the desert kept its secrets well. The desert dawn came like a whispered promise, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Maggie woke to find Crow already moving, rolling his blanket with practiced efficiency. Her body ached from the hard ground, and her throat felt parched despite the water they'd shared the night before. Morning comes early in the desert, Crow said without looking at her. We need to cover ground before the heat builds. Maggie struggled to her feet, her Eastern dress already feeling like a burden. She watched as Crow produced a small knife and began cutting strips from one of her abandoned petticoats. What are you doing? Making you desert ready. He handed her the strips. Wrap these around your hands and face when the sun gets high. That white skin of yours will blister like bacon in a pan. She should have been offended by his familiarity with her garments, but survival had already begun to eclipse propriety. I need to attend to necessities. Crow pointed to a cluster of rocks. Watch for snakes. Stamp your feet as you walk. They feel the vibration. When she returned, he had sorted through her trunk, creating a small pile of essentials. One change of clothes, your water bottle, that medicine bottle, laudanum. For headaches. Maggie lied. It was for the nights when memories of her stepfather's hands became too vivid. He nodded without judgment. Food. She produced a small cloth bag. Crackers, some dried fruit. Won't last a day. Good thing I know where to find desert food. He fashioned a carrying sling from one of her shawls. Apache women could carry a whole household this way. You'll manage less. They set out as the first rays of sun crested the horizon. The desert that had seemed merely vast from the train window now revealed itself as an endless ocean of sand, rock, and stubborn vegetation. Crow moved with the fluid grace of someone born to this land, while Maggie stumbled and struggled in her inappropriate boots. Tell me about this man, Crow said after they'd walked in silence for an hour. The one who didn't come. Thomas Hartwell? The name tasted bitter now. He wrote beautiful letters, said he had a ranch, cattle, a good life waiting, said he was lonely. She laughed, sharp and humorless. I suppose he found a cure for loneliness that didn't require importing it from Boston. Maybe she was prettier. Thank you. That's very comforting. Crow glanced back at her, and she caught what might have been amusement in his dark eyes. Meant maybe she was richer. Men like that think with their purses. They continued walking, the sun climbing higher, transforming the desert into a furnace, true to his word. Crow began teaching her survival. He showed her which cacti held water, how to spot the holes of dangerous creatures, the signs that predicted weather changes. Your people lived here for centuries, Maggie observed, pausing to catch her breath, before we came and ruined it all. Some say the land was always hard. We just learned to be harder. He studied the horizon. Storm coming. See how the clouds gather there. We'll need shelter by nightfall. I don't see any clouds. You're looking with eastern eyes. Look with desert eyes. She tried, squinting at the seemingly clear sky. I still don't. There. He moved behind her, his arm extending past her shoulder to point. That shimmer that ain't heat. The way the birds fly low, the smell. Standing so close, she could smell him too, leather and sage and something wild. It should have frightened her. Instead, she found it oddly comforting after Thomas's flowery letters that had promised cologne and pomade. I smelled dust. Rain coming to make it. He stepped away. 3, maybe 4 hours. We need to find the caves. Caves. Old Apache hiding places, from the Spanish first, then Mexicans, then you Americans. His voice held generations of running. My grandfather showed me when I was young, before the schools. They altered course, Crow leading them toward a series of low hills that looked no different from any others to Maggie's untrained eye. The heat grew oppressive. She wrapped the cloth strips around her face as instructed, grateful for even that small protection. Why didn't you go back? She asked during one of their rest stops. After the school, after the army. Why not find another band of Apache? Crow was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. You can't go back to something that don't exist anymore. The free bands are gone, killed or on reservations, and the reservation Apache. He shrugged. They look at me and see a man who learned the white man's words. Contaminated. So you're caught between worlds. Like you. He looked at her directly. Too ruined for Boston society. Too Eastern for frontier life. The truth of it stung. I could learn. I'm learning now, aren't I? Learning to walk desert and learning to live desert are different things. But his tone held approval. You're doing better than I expected. Haven't complained once. My feet are screaming complaints. But your mouth isn't. That's what counts. By afternoon, the promised storm clouds had materialized, turning the sky an ominous gray. Wind began to whip at their clothes, carrying the sharp scent of rain. Crow quickened their pace. leading them up a rocky slope that had Maggie's legs burning. "There," he said finally, pointing to what looked like a shadow in the rock face. "Apache Haven." The cave mouth was narrow, requiring them to squeeze through sideways. Inside, it opened into a larger chamber, cool and dim after the desert heat. Evidence of ancient fires marked the floor. "People sheltered here before Christ was born," Crow said, running his hand along the smooth walls. "Look." Maggie peered closer and gasped. Paintings covered the stone figures hunting, dancing, living. The colors had faded, but the life in them remained vibrant. "It's beautiful." "Sacred. We shouldn't be here, but—" Thunder rumbled outside. "The spirits understand necessity." They settled against the back wall as the storm broke. Rain fell in sheets, turning the desert into a temporary river. Lightning illuminated the cave in stark flashes, revealing more paintings, more stories frozen in time. "I would have died out there," Maggie said quietly. "If you hadn't helped me." "Maybe. Deserts killed stronger people than you." "Why did you help me, really?" Crow pulled his knees to his chest, looking younger suddenly. "My sister would be about your age, if she'd lived. Red hair, too, from our Mexican grandmother." He touched that scar again. "A nervous habit. When I saw you on that platform, crying over that paper, I thought about her, how I'd want someone to help her." "What was her name?" "Morning Star. Maria. The priests called her." His voice roughened. "She was 12 when the soldiers came. Too young to—" He stopped, jaw tight. Maggie wanted to comfort him, but didn't know how. What comfort could she offer for such loss instead? She asked, "Tell me about her. What was she like?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Stubborn. Thought she could tame wild horses just by talking to them. Used to braid flowers in my hair when I slept. Then laugh when I'd walk around camp decorated like a maiden. She sounds wonderful." She was. They all were. The smile faded. "The Apache and you Eastern folks fear they were mothers singing lullabies, fathers teaching boys to hunt with patience, grandmothers telling stories by firelight, just people. But that don't make for exciting newspaper stories." Thunder crashed overhead, making Maggie jump. Crow steadied her with a hand on her arm, withdrawing it quickly when she looked at him. "Storm will pass by nightfall," he said. "We'll sleep here. Start early again." "How far to the mission?" "By tomorrow's sunset, if we're lucky. Day after, if not." Maggie pulled out her small food supply, offering him crackers. He took one, then produced his own contribution strips of dried meat and some kind of root. "Mescal," he explained. "Cooked right, it's sweet. Kept my people alive through hard winters." They ate in companionable silence, listening to the storm rage outside. The cave felt like a sanctuary, a place outside time where an Irish woman and an Apache man could simply be two human beings sharing shelter. "I've been thinking," Maggie said eventually, "about what you said. New beginnings being endings in disguise." "Yeah. Maybe that's not bad. Maybe some things need to end." She thought of her stepfather, of the marriage that would have trapped her with a man who lied. Maybe we get to choose what begins next. Philosophy from an Eastern lady now. "The Irish have our own wisdom, usually involves whiskey and fighting, but it's wisdom nonetheless." That surprised a laugh from him, the first real laugh she'd heard. It transformed his face, revealing the young man beneath the scars and wariness. "My grandmother would have liked you," he said. "She appreciated women with sharp tongues, said they made better warriors than men because they fought with words before weapons. I'd rather not fight at all." "Then you picked the wrong land. Margaret Mary O'Brien, this desert fights you every day just for the right to breathe." The storm began to ease as evening approached. Water dripped from the cave mouth, and the air smelled clean and alive. Crow built a small fire from dried brush stored in the cave, the smoke drawing up through some natural chimney. "Someone will see," Maggie worried. Apache fires burned clean, and whose looking soldiers are lazy in storms? Bandits, too. They sat by the fire as darkness fell, the cave paintings dancing in the flickering light. Maggie found herself studying Crow's profile, the strong nose, sharp cheekbones, the way his hair fell loose past his shoulders. He was handsome in a way Thomas's daguerreotype could never capture, wild and real and present. "You're staring," he said without turning. Heat flooded her cheeks. "I was looking at the paintings." Liar. But his tone was gentle. "What do you see?" "Someone who doesn't match the stories they tell in Boston." "What stories?" "Savages, murderers, threats to civilization." She gestured at the cave. "But this is civilization, just different." "Careful. Talk like that gets white women shunned." "I'm already shunned, cast out for the sin of seeking love through letters." She pulled her blanket closer. "At least your exile has dignity. Mine's just pathetic." "Nothing pathetic about hope." He did look at her then, firelight reflecting in his dark eyes. "Takes courage to cross a continent for love, even if love lied." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding deeper than words. Two outcasts recognizing something familiar in each other's pain. "We should sleep," Crow said abruptly, breaking the spell. "Tomorrow's walk is harder, uphill mostly." They arranged their bedding on opposite sides of the fire. But as the flames died to embers and darkness crept in, Maggie found herself afraid again. Not of Crow, that fear had died sometime during the day's journey, but of the vastness outside, the uncertainty ahead. "Crow," she whispered. "Tell me a story, like your grandmother's told." Silence. Then, "What kind of story?" "Any kind, something to push back the dark." He was quiet so long she thought he'd refused. Then his voice came soft through the darkness, carrying the rhythm of ancient telling. "Long ago, when the world was younger, first woman woke alone in darkness. She was afraid, like you, but instead of crying, she began to gather sparks of light, hiding them in her hair." Maggie closed her eyes, letting his voice wash over her. The story wound through creation and courage, through darkness faced and overcome. She fell asleep to the sound of Apache words mixed with English, to rain dripping outside and fire crackling within. When she woke briefly in the night, she saw Crow sitting up, keeping watch as promised. His silhouette against the cave mouth looked eternal guardian and ghost, protector and protected. "Sleep," he said softly. "Still hours till dawn." She slept and dreamed of painted horses and morning stars' laughter, of deserts that bloomed after rain and hearts that might bloom after loss. Outside, the storm passed, leaving the world washed and waiting for whatever tomorrow would bring. The mission of San Felipe appeared like a mirage in the late afternoon sun, its adobe walls rising from the desert floor in defiance of the wilderness. After 2 days of hard travel, Maggie's feet were blistered and bleeding, her dress torn and stained beyond repair. But the sight of those walls, promising shelter and safety, gave her strength for the final steps. "There," Crow said, pointing to the bell tower that rose above the compound. "Padre Antonio's kingdom of misfits." As they approached, children began appearing, Apache, Mexican, and mixed-blood youngsters who watched from doorways and corners with curious eyes. They whispered to each other in a mixture of languages, pointing at the strange pair. "Don't stare back," Crow advised. "Some of them bite." The children, especially the children, wild as desert cats, most of them. An old man emerged from the chapel, his Franciscan robes dusty and patched. His face was a map of wrinkles, but his eyes held warmth that transcended age. He walked with a carved mesquite staff, each step deliberate. "Samuel Crow walking," the padre said, his voice carrying surprising strength. "I heard you were dead." Disappointed. Relieved. Padre Antonio's gaze shifted to Maggie. "And who is this?" "Margaret O'Brien." she said, attempting a curtsy despite her exhaustion. Late of Boston. Early of nowhere. Crow added, train platform bride. Groom found local comfort instead. The padre's eyes softened with understanding. Ah, another soul the desert has collected. He gestured toward the mission. Come, Sister Catherine will see to your needs. Señorita, Samuel, you know where the men's quarters are. I'm not staying, Crow said quickly. No, then where will you go? The padre's tone held gentle challenge. Back to sleeping under train platforms, back to waiting for a world that's moved on without you. Crow's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a woman approached tall and sturdy. With steel-gray hair barely contained beneath her habit, her face would have been severe except for laugh lines that suggested hidden warmth. Sister Catherine, the padre introduced. This is Miss O'Brien. She'll need our hospitality. The nun's sharp eyes took in Maggie's condition, the torn dress, the sunburned skin, the way she swayed on her feet. Mother of God, child, what have you been through? The desert, Maggie said simply. And this one, Sister Catherine glanced at Crow. Don't tell me you've been traveling alone with... He saved my life, Maggie interrupted. I would have died without his help. Something in her fierce defense made both religious look at Crow with new interest. He shifted uncomfortably under their scrutiny. Well, Sister Catherine said finally. Come then. Hot water and clean clothes first. Questions later. As the nun led Maggie away, she looked back to see Crow still standing with the padre, two figures dark against the sunset. Something twisted in her chest, a fear that he would vanish, that this strange connection forged in desperation would dissolve in civilization's light. The mission's women's quarters were simple but clean, a row of small cells with narrow beds and wooden crosses. Sister Catherine brought a basin of water and watched as Maggie unwound the makeshift bandages from her feet. Apache work, the nun observed. Practical, like them. You sound as if you know them well. 10 years I've been here, seen children come with nothing but fear and hunger, seen them leave with skills, faith, hope. She produced a salve that smelled of herbs. Not all of them, of course. Some are too broken. Some the world breaks again after they leave. And Crow Samuel. Sister Catherine's hands paused in their work. You care about him. He helped me. I'm curious. The nun's tone suggested she heard more than curiosity. Samuel came to us 5 years ago. Escaped from the government school. Half dead from beatings. Padre Antonio hid him. Taught him letters and numbers beyond what those schools hammered in. The boy has a mind like a trap, catches everything. But he left. Soldiers came. They always do. Took him back, made him a scout. When he refused to track his own people. She gestured vaguely. That scar tells the story. They dumped him at Copper Ridge like garbage. 3rd time he's been back here. 3rd. Desert keeps spitting him out. Mission keeps taking him in. But he never stays long. Too much ghost in him. Sister Catherine finished with the salve. Now, let's see about getting you properly dressed. Those Eastern fashions won't last a day here. She produced a simple cotton dress and a pair of sturdy boots, donated by a rancher's wife who found God after her husband found whiskey. Should fit near enough. As Maggie changed, she asked, What is this place exactly? Officially, a mission school for indigenous children. Unofficially, a refuge for anyone the territory has chewed up and spit out. Sister Catherine's smile held pride and sorrow in equal measure. We have Apache children whose parents were killed, Mexican girls whose families sold them, boys of all colors who ran from worse places, and occasionally, we have Eastern ladies who trusted the wrong promises. You must think me foolish. I think you brave or desperate. Sometimes. They look the same, Maggie finished. Crow said that too. Did he now? The nun's eyebrows rose. Man doesn't usually waste words on philosophy. A bell rang somewhere in the compound. Sister Catherine stood, brushing dust from her habit. "Supper. You'll eat with the women and children tonight. Tomorrow, we'll discuss your place here." "My place?" "Everyone works at San Felipe. No passengers on this ship." She paused at the door. "What skills do you have?" "I can read, write, do sums, sew, cook a little. I know some Latin from church." "Latin?" Sister Catherine laughed. "Well, that'll be useful when the Apache children need to debate theology. Can you teach—" "I've never tried." "Then you'll learn. We all do what's needed here." The dining hall was chaos orchestrated, long tables filled with children of every shade, chattering in multiple languages. Maggie found herself seated between a solemn Apache girl of perhaps 10 and a Mexican boy who couldn't stop grinning. The food was simple beans, flatbread, preserved peaches, but after 2 days of desert rations, it tasted like a feast. "You're the lady who came with Samuel," the Apache girl said in careful English. "Yes, I'm Maggie." "I'm Rose. That's not my real name. Sister Catherine says I needed a Christian name." She leaned closer, whispering, "But I remember my real name. I whisper it to myself at night so I won't forget." Maggie's heart clenched. "That's very wise. Samuel remembers all our real names. He speaks them when the sisters aren't listening." Rose studied Maggie with 2 old eyes. "Will you marry him?" "What? No. Why would you think—" "He brought you here. Apache men don't bring women places unless they mean something." Before Maggie could respond, commotion erupted at the boys' table. 2 older youths had begun shoving each other, voices rising in anger. Sister Catherine moved to intervene, but Crow appeared first, materializing from wherever he'd been eating. He spoke low and sharp in Apache, then Spanish. Both boys settled immediately. "See," Rose said. "He protects. That's what men do for their women." "I'm not his woman." Rose shrugged, unconvinced, and returned to her meal. After supper, Maggie found herself wandering the courtyard, needing air and space to think. The mission was larger than it appeared from outside workshops, gardens, a small stable. Children still moved about despite the late hour, doing chores or playing quiet games. She discovered Crow in the stable, brushing a scarred mare that looked as trail-worn as he did. He didn't acknowledge her presence, but she sensed he knew she was there. "Planning to leave tonight?" she asked. "Tomorrow, maybe. Or next week." He continued brushing. "Hard to say." "How the children adore you." "They're fools, then. Rose says you remember their real names." His hand stilled. "Someone should. The sisters mean well. But Christian names don't make them Christian, just makes them forget who they were." "Is that so terrible? Maybe forgetting helps?" He turned to face her then, eyes hard. "You want to forget who you were, Margaret Mary O'Brien, who trusted love letters?" "Maybe." "Then you're a fool too. We are what we are. Desert didn't change that. Just stripped away the lies we tell ourselves." He returned to the horse. "You'll do well here. Sisters will teach you to save souls while saving your own." "And you, what will you do?" "What I always do? Drift, survive, wait for the world to make sense." "That sounds lonely." "Better than the alternative." "Which is—" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, hoping, trusting, watching it burn again. Before she could respond, voices rose from beyond the walls, men's voices, harsh with drink and authority. Crow's whole body tensed, hand moving to the knife at his belt. "Soldiers," he said, "coming for roll call, making sure the good padre isn't harboring fugitives." His smile held no humor. "Better get inside. Miss, wouldn't want them thinking you're consorting with savages." "You're not—" "Go." The word came sharp. "Now." She went, but stopped in the shadowed doorway to watch. A squad of cavalry entered the courtyard, their blue uniforms dusty from travel. The sergeant, a thick-set man with mutton chops, swaggered toward Padre Antonio. "Evening, Padre. Routine inspection, making sure all your charges are accounted for. All children are present. Sergeant Morrison, as always. And adults, no renegades hiding in your Christian charity. Only those God sends to our door." Morrison's eyes swept the courtyard, landing on Crow. Well, Samuel the Scout, heard you turned rabbit on us." "Heard wrong," Crow said evenly. "Got discharged, honorably." "That's not how Captain Blackwood tells it." Morrison stepped closer. "He says you refused orders. Says you're lucky he only marked that pretty face instead of hanging you for insubordination." "Captain Blackwood says many things, not all of them true." The sergeant's hand dropped to his pistol. "Careful. Breed. Your Padre's protection only goes so far, as does your authority." Sister Catherine interrupted, appearing like an avenging angel. "This is church property. Sergeant, you've done your count. Time to leave." Morrison glared but stepped back. "Mark me. Savage. You step 1 foot wrong, and I'll personally drag you back to face military justice." His gaze found Maggie in the doorway. "And you, miss, might want to be careful about the company you keep. Wouldn't want folks getting the wrong idea about your character." Heat flooded her face, but before she could speak, Morrison and his men were leaving, their laughter ugly in the quiet night. Crow stood still as stone until they were gone, then sagged against the stable wall. Padre Antonio approached, placing a weathered hand on the younger man's shoulder. "They're getting bolder," the Padre said softly. "Blackwood wants this place closed, wants the children scattered to government schools." Crow's voice was hollow. "I shouldn't have come here. I'm bringing trouble to your door. My door has weathered worse storms than Captain Blackwood." The Padre smiled. "Besides, where else would you go? This is your home, Samuel, whether you admit it or not." "Home." Crow tested the word like foreign language. "I had a home once. Soldiers burned it." "Then perhaps it's time to build a new one." "With what ashes and regret?" "With faith, with purpose, with the family you choose rather than the one you lost." Crow shook his head. "You ask too much, old man." "I ask only what you're capable of giving. Think on it." The Padre moved away, then paused. "The young woman, she defended you to Sister Catherine, fiercely. She's grateful. It'll pass." "Perhaps, or perhaps the desert brought you both here for reasons neither of you understand yet." After the Padre left, Maggie emerged from her hiding spot. Crow didn't look surprised. "Eavesdropping's a sin, I hear." "Add it to my collection." She moved closer. "That sergeant is nothing. Men like him are smoke. Blackwood's the fire." He studied her face. "You should stay away from me. Morrison was right about your reputation." "My reputation was destroyed the moment Thomas's telegram arrived. I'm already the abandoned mail-order bride. Consorting with Apache can't make it worse. You don't know this world. The lines drawn in sand and blood. Cross them and what?" She stepped close enough to see the pain he carried like armor. "They'll abandon me, cast me out, make me an exile. Too late. I'm already there." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the wall he'd built. "You don't understand what you're risking." "Then explain it to me." He turned away. "Get some sleep. Margaret Mary, tomorrow starts early here." She wanted to press, to break through his defenses like he'd broken through hers in the desert. But exhaustion won. She made her way back to the women's quarters, where Rose was already asleep in the next bed, whispering her real name into the darkness. As Maggie settled onto the thin mattress, she thought about homes built from ashes, about the family you choose, about lines drawn in sand, outside. She could hear Crow still in the stable, talking low to the horses in Apache, another exile seeking comfort from fellow wanderers. Sister Catherine appeared in the doorway. "Settling in." trying to... The nun entered, sitting on the edge of Maggie's bed with maternal familiarity. He's a good man, Samuel, broken in places, sharp in others, but good at the core. Why are you telling me this? Because I see how you look at each other, like survivors recognizing their own kind. She patted Maggie's hand. Be careful, child. But don't be so careful you miss what God might be offering. And what's that? A second chance. Those are rare in the desert. Best not waste them. After the sister left, Maggie lay in the darkness, listening to the mission settling for sleep. Somewhere a child cried and was comforted. Somewhere Crow kept vigil with the horses. Somewhere soldiers planned their next inspection. And Captain Blackwood schemed to scatter these children like seed on barren ground. But for now, in this moment, she was safe, fed, sheltered, among people who understood exile and survival. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd answered Thomas's advertisement, but perhaps, as Crow said, that was the desert stripping away lies. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She would learn to teach children who'd lost everything, learn to navigate the dangerous currents between Apache and white, between charity and politics, learn whether the connection forged in desperation could survive in this strange sanctuary. But tonight, she simply whispered a prayer of gratitude for painted caves and Apache wisdom, for bitter men who still showed kindness, for missions that sheltered the abandoned. And if her prayer included a certain scarred scout who spoke to horses and remembered real names, only God and the desert stars bore witness. A month had passed at San Felipe, and Maggie had found her rhythm in the mission's daily dance of prayer, work, and teaching. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard as she watched her students practice their letters in the dust. Rose sat apart, as usual, her stylus moving with fierce concentration. Miss Maggie, a boy named David called out, "How do you spell freedom?" Before she could answer, Crow's voice came from the doorway. "Freedom, but spelling it's easier than finding it." The children brightened at his presence. He'd been coming to her classes more often, translating when the younger ones struggled with English, teaching them to write their Apache names alongside their Christian ones when Sister Catherine wasn't watching. "Samuel's going to tell us about the eagle dance," Rose announced. "Not today," he said, but his refusal lacked conviction. "Please," the chorus came from a dozen young voices. Maggie caught his eye. "It would help with their cultural studies." "Cultural studies," he repeated, amused. "That what we're calling it now." But he sat on the ground, and the children gathered close. As he began to speak half in English, half in Apache, Maggie found herself drawn into the story too. His hands moved, illustrating the eagle's flight, the hunter's patience, the sacred moment of connection between earth and sky. This was a different man than the wary exile she'd met at the train platform. Here, surrounded by children who shared his heritage, something in him eased. The hardness remained, but underneath lay something precious and protected. "The eagle carries our prayers," he was saying, "up where the spirits can hear them clear." "What do you pray for?" David asked. Crow's eyes found Maggie's across the circle. Understanding, strength to do what's needed. A pause. Sometimes, for the courage to stay instead of run. After the lesson, as children scattered to their other duties, Crow lingered. They'd developed a habit of these moments, not quite planned, not quite avoided. "You're good with them," Maggie said, gathering her teaching materials. "They remind me of better times." He picked up a dropped stylus, handed it to her. Their fingers brushed, and neither pulled away quickly. "Before the world went mad." "Tell me about her, your wife." The request surprised them both. In the weeks since their arrival, they danced around his past, sharing only fragments. But something about the morning, the children's laughter still echoing, made the question feel natural. Crow sat on the low wall, gesturing for her to join him. "Elena, that was her name. Met her at a trading post when I was 17. She was arguing with a merchant about the price of blankets, fierce as a wildcat, beautiful as sunrise. His voice softened with memory. Took me 3 months to convince her father I was worth her attention. You loved her. Like breathing, natural and necessary. He picked at a loose thread on his shirt. We had 2 years, 2 harvests. She was carrying our child when the soldiers came. Maggie's breath caught. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. No, it's good to speak her name. I haven't in years. He looked at the sky, as if seeing eagles there. The baby would have been 8 now, boy or girl. I'll never know. They sat in silence, the weight of lost lives heavy between them. Then Maggie spoke, surprising herself with a confession. I was engaged before, in Boston. Crow turned, studying her face. His name was James. My mother's choice, good family, steady income, proper in every way. She smoothed her skirt, a nervous gesture. 3 weeks before the wedding, I found him with my cousin Catherine in the garden shed, of all places. Is that why you answered the advertisement? Partly. Also because staying meant marrying someone else Mother chose. Someone who looked at me like property to be acquired. She shivered despite the warmth. My stepfather had similar eyes. After Father died, he made our home a place of fear. Mother pretended not to see, grateful for financial security. He hurt you. It wasn't a question. Not in ways that leave visible scars. But yes. She touched the medicine bottle in her pocket. The laudanum she still needed some nights. When Thomas's letter came, it seemed like escape to a fairy tale. Foolish. Not foolish. Hopeful. There's a difference. Crow's hand covered hers on the wall. Takes courage to reach for happiness when the world's taught you to expect pain. The touch was electric, sending warmth up her arm. She should pull away, propriety demanded it. Instead, she turned her hand palm up, letting their fingers intertwine. The children think we're courting, she said softly. Are we? The directness made her heart race. I don't know. Are Apache customs so different? Some ways yes, some no. Man proves his worth through actions, not words. Woman decides if those actions are enough. He squeezed her hand gently. But I got nothing to offer. No horses, no home, no clan to speak for me. Just a scarred face and too many ghosts. I'm not looking for horses. What then? She thought of her mother's parlor, full of proper suitors with empty eyes. Of Thomas's promises that turned to smoke. Of all the ways the world had tried to shape her into something small and manageable. Truth, she said finally. Someone who sees me clear and doesn't run. Someone who understands that broken doesn't mean worthless. He lifted their joined hands, pressed his lips to her knuckles. The gesture was gentle, reverent, nothing like the aggressive possession she'd known from Boston men. Margaret Mary O'Brien, he said against her skin. You're the least worthless person I've met. Samuel. They sprang apart as Sister Catherine's voice rang across the courtyard. But it wasn't disapproval in her tone, it was alarm. She appeared around the corner, habit flying, face flushed with urgency. Riders coming, military, many of them. She glanced at their still close positions, but didn't comment. Padre Antonio wants you in the chapel, both of you. They found the priest at the altar, his usual calm cracked with worry. Captain Blackwood's coming, a full company. My sources in town say he has new orders. What kind of orders? Crow asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. To close the mission, transfer all children to the government school at Fort Union. The Padre's hands shook slightly. He claims we're fostering rebellion, teaching savage ways instead of civilization. He wants the land, Sister Catherine said bitterly. The water rights. This mission sits on the best well for 50 miles. What do we do? Maggie asked. We pray. Padre Antonio said, and we prepare. Samuel, how many of the older boys would fight if pressed? Too many hot-headed fools would get themselves killed. Crow's jaw tightened. I won't let that happen. No violence. The Padre agreed. But perhaps creative resistance. They had perhaps an hour before Blackwood arrived. The mission exploded into controlled chaos. Children were gathered, instructed, prepared. The older ones understood immediately this was about survival of their sanctuary. The younger ones sensed the tension, clinging to teachers and each other. Maggie found herself with the girls, helping Sister Catherine organize them in the chapel. Rose grabbed her hand. They're taking us away, aren't they? Like they took my parents. Not if we can help it, Maggie promised, praying she could keep her word. When Blackwood's company rode through the gates, they found the entire mission population gathered in the courtyard, singing, not hymns Apache songs, Mexican ballads, African spirituals brought by a freed slave who'd found refuge here, a chorus of defiance wrapped in melody. Captain Marcus Blackwood was everything Maggie expected, tall, rigid, with cold gray eyes and a mouth made for cruel smiles. His uniform was immaculate despite the desert dust, his bearing that of a man who expected immediate obedience. Padre, he said, dismounting with practiced ease. This display is unnecessary. I have legal orders. May I see them? Padre Antonio's voice was mild, but steel ran beneath. Blackwood produced a document, signed by the territorial governor himself. All indigenous children are to be transferred to proper educational facilities. This experiment in mixed schooling ends today. These children are thriving here. These children are learning savage ways alongside their letters. Blackwood's eyes found Crow in the crowd. And you harbor fugitives. Samuel Crowwalking is wanted for desertion and insubordination. I was discharged, Crow said, stepping forward. Dishonorably, after striking a superior officer. Blackwood smiled, touching the pristine glove on his right hand. My face healed, but the insult remains. Maggie's mind raced, piecing together the truth. Crow's scar. Blackwood's hatred. This was personal beyond politics. You want revenge, she said, surprising herself by speaking. This isn't about the children at all. Blackwood's attention turned to her, and she fought not to shrink from his reptilian gaze. And you are? Margaret O'Brien, teacher. Ah, yes, the abandoned bride who consorts with savages. His smile grew. Your reputation precedes you. Miss, tell me, do you share your bed with this Apache cur? Or does he sleep on the floor like the animal he is? The insult was calculated to provoke. Crow tensed, hand moving toward his knife, but Maggie touched his arm, stilling him. Around them, she felt the mission population bristle with shared outrage. Captain, Padre Antonio interjected. Such language is inappropriate. What's inappropriate is this mongrel collection pretending at civilization. Blackwood gestured to his men. Sergeant Morrison, begin loading the children. Separate them by race. It'll make processing easier. No! The word came from everywhere at once. Children linked arms. Adults stepped in front of them. Even the horses in the stable seemed to sense the tension, whinnying nervously. You refuse a direct order. Blackwood's voice held anticipation. We refuse to let you scatter our family. Sister Catherine said, these children have lost enough. Family, Blackwood laughed. This collection of breeds and refuse very well. Sergeant, if they won't separate voluntarily... Wait! Crow stepped forward, hands raised. You want me, Blackwood, not them. Let's settle this between us. Samuel, no. Padre Antonio warned. But Crow continued forward until he stood mere feet from the captain. Single combat, Apache way. You win, I surrender myself, and the mission complies. I win, you leave and don't return. Blackwood's eyes glinted. You think me fool enough to fight a savage on his terms? I think you're proud enough to want to prove superiority. Crow smiled. sharp and challenging. "Unless you're afraid would explain why you needed 6 men to give me this scar." The insult hit home. Blackwood's face flushed. Around them, soldiers shifted uncomfortably. They'd heard different versions of that story. "Captain," Morrison said quietly, "regulations don't allow—" Silence. Blackwood removed his jacket, handed it to an aide. "Terms." "First blood," Padre Antonio said quickly, before Crow could suggest worse. "And I'll oversee as neutral party." "First blood or surrender," Blackwood corrected. "When this savage yields, he'll admit his inferior nature before all." They cleared a circle in the courtyard. Maggie wanted to protest, to stop this madness, but Sister Catherine held her back. "Sometimes men must settle things with blood," the nun whispered. "Pray it's only a little." The combatants faced each other, Blackwood with his cavalry saber, Crow with his hunting knife. David had dared to ask once about knife fighting, and Crow had said it was like dancing with death as your partner. Blackwood struck first, saber flashing in the afternoon sun. Crow dodged, fluid as water, but the blade caught his shirt, tearing fabric. The captain pressed his advantage, training and reach giving him superiority. But Crow had grown up fighting for survival. He moved like his namesake, sudden shifts in direction, using Blackwood's aggression against him. The crowd held its breath as steel met steel, sparked, separated. Then Blackwood made an error. He glanced at Maggie, his smile suggesting what he'd do to her after Crow fell. In that moment of distraction, Crow struck, not with his blade, but with his free hand. Catching Blackwood's wrist and twisting, the saber went flying as Crow's knife found the captain's throat, pressing just hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. "First blood," Crow said softly. "Yield." Blackwood's face contorted with rage and humiliation, but with the blade at his throat and his men watching, he had no choice. "I yield." Crow stepped back immediately, lowering his knife. "Your word, Captain. The mission remains untouched." "My word." The agreement came through gritted teeth. Blackwood retrieved his saber, sheathed it with shaking hands. "But mark me, savage. This isn't over. The law will have this place closed, one way or another." He strode to his horse, mounted stiffly. His men followed, Morrison casting one last warning glance at the mission inhabitants. As the dust of their departure settled, a cheer rose from the children. But Crow didn't celebrate. He stood in the circle's center, blood seeping through his torn shirt where Blackwood's saber had grazed him. Maggie went to him without thinking, pressing her handkerchief to the wound. "Foolish," she murmured. "Reckless, brave. Had to protect them." His voice was rough with spent adrenaline. "Protect you? I don't need protecting." "No." He covered her hand with his. "But I need to give it." "Understand." She did. After a lifetime of taking what others dealt, he needed to stand between danger and those he cared for, loved. The word hovered unspoken between them. Padre Antonio approached, face grave despite their victory. "You've made a powerful enemy. Samuel. He won't forget this humiliation. Already had him as enemy. Now it's in the open. He'll return with more men, better papers." Sister Catherine predicted. "This was a battle, not the war. Then we prepare for war." Crow said simply. That night, the mission celebrated with cautious joy. Extra rations were distributed, and the children performed traditional dances in the courtyard. Maggie found herself pulled into a Mexican circle dance, laughing as she tried to follow the steps. Later, she found Crow on the chapel roof, watching stars. She climbed up to join him, no longer caring about propriety. "Blackwood was wrong," she said without preamble. "What he said about us? But I wish he'd been right." Crow turned sharply. "Maggie, I know what I'm saying." She moved closer. I've spent my whole life letting others dictate my worth. James, Thomas, even my mother. I'm tired of it. You don't know what you're risking. Being with me means being with someone who sees me true, who fought for children not his own because it was right, who carries ghosts but hasn't let them make him cruel. She touched his face, fingers tracing near his scar. I choose this risk. He caught her hand, held it against his cheek. The world won't be kind to us. When has it ever been? Instead of answering, he kissed her. Not the polite pecks of Boston courtship or the aggressive claiming she'd feared, but something deeper, a promise made in silence, a covenant between survivors. When they parted, both breathing unsteadily, Crow smiled. My grandmother would say the spirits brought us together. And what do you say? That maybe broken pieces can make something whole if they fit right together. Below them, the mission slept. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, Blackwood's certain retaliation, the territorial government's pressure, the endless struggle to protect these children caught between worlds. But tonight, under stars that had witnessed countless loves and losses, an Irish teacher and an Apache scout chose each other despite all the reasons they shouldn't. Stay with me, Maggie whispered, echoing her plea from that first night but with new meaning. Until the morning, he asked, remembering. Until all the morning's end. He pulled her close, and they watched the stars wheel overhead. Two souls finding home not in a place, but in each other. The war for the mission would continue. But they would face it together, broken perhaps, but no longer alone. The acrid smell of smoke woke Maggie from restless sleep. For a moment, she thought herself back in Boston, perhaps near the factory districts. Then Rose's terrified cry brought reality crashing back. Fire! The chapel's on fire! Maggie flew from her bed, not bothering with shoes or shawl. In the courtyard, orange flames already licked at the mission's heart, the chapel where generations had found solace. Children stumbled from dormitories, some crying, others frozen in shock. Where's Sister Catherine? Maggie grabbed David as he ran past. Getting the little ones out. He pointed toward the boys' quarters, where smoke billowed thickest. Young Crow appeared through the chaos, soot-streaked and urgent. They torched the grain stores too. This is Blackwood. How do you... Military precision. 3 fires. Set to trap us. He pressed a wet cloth into her hands. Cover your face. Help me get everyone to the well. Padre Antonio emerged from the burning chapel, clutching the mission's records and sacred vessels. His face showed heartbreak deeper than physical pain. 40 years, he whispered. 40 years of prayer in those walls. Prayers don't burn. Padre, Sister Catherine called, herding a group of terrified girls. Buildings do. Focus on the living. They formed human chains, passing buckets from the well in futile attempts to contain the blaze. But Blackwood had planned well. The fires were set to create maximum destruction with minimal chance of control. The desert wind carried sparks to outbuildings, spreading devastation. The stable, one of the older boys shouted. The horses! Crow and several youths ran toward the flames. Maggie followed, knowing the horses meant survival in this harsh land. Inside, animals screamed in terror, rearing against their restraints. Smoke thick as winter wool filled the space. Cut them loose, Crow ordered, slashing at ropes. Let them run! They worked frantically, dodging hooves and falling timbers. Maggie's eyes streamed, lungs burning with each breath. A beam crashed down, separating her from the exit. Panic clawed at her throat. Then Crow was there, shouldering the burning wood aside, pulling her against him. Together, he said against her ear. Move together. They stumbled out as the roof collapsed behind them. In the courtyard, freed horses milled in confusion while humans battled flames that seemed to grow hungrier with each passing moment. Miss Maggie Rose appeared, clutching something to her chest. I saved your books. The girl had risked everything to rescue Maggie's teaching materials. The gesture broke something inside her, this child who'd lost so much still trying to preserve what little remained. Foolish, brave girl. Maggie hugged her tight. Books can be replaced. You can't. Dawn came like a curse, revealing the devastation. The chapel was gone, along with the grain stores, stable, and half the dormitories. What Blackwood's lawyers couldn't accomplish, his hired arsonists had achieved in one night. But the mission's people remained, soot-covered and exhausted, but alive. They gathered in the courtyard as Padre Antonio led prayers of thanksgiving for their survival. We should track them, one of the Apache boys said. Make them pay. With what? Crow's voice held controlled fury. They'll have alibis. Blackwood was probably playing cards in town, witnesses ready to swear to it. So we do nothing. We survive. We rebuild. We don't give him the excuse to return with legal authority. Crow looked at each young face. Revenge feels good but accomplishes little. Trust me, I've tried it. Sister Catherine organized the salvage efforts. What supplies remained were gathered and rationed. The injured, mostly minor burns and smoke inhalation, were tended. But everyone understood the truth without shelter and food stores. The mission couldn't survive. I have cousins in Socorro. One of the Mexican women offered. They could take my children. The reservation would accept us back, an Apache grandmother said quietly, if we renounce the Christian teaching. The fragmenting had begun exactly what Blackwood intended. Scatter the community, destroy the bonds that held them together. Maggie watched hope die in small increments across familiar faces. No. The word came from Crow, sharp as flint. We don't scatter, not yet. What choice do we have? Sister Catherine gestured at the ruins. Winter comes in 2 months. Without shelter. There's another way. He glanced at Padre Antonio. The old places, the canyon settlements. The priest's eyes widened. Samuel, those have been abandoned for generations. But they're still there. Stone doesn't burn. Crow addressed the gathering. 5 days north. There are cliff dwellings, ancient ones, from before the Spanish. Shelter, water, defensive positions. That's Apache sacred land, one of the elders protested. The spirits! The spirits understand necessity. Crow's voice carried authority Maggie hadn't heard before. My grandfather's people used them when the Spanish came. We can use them now. It's too dangerous, Sister Catherine argued. Taking children through that terrain, with Blackwood possibly pursuing. Staying is death, slow or fast. But death. Crow looked at each face. I can guide us, those who want to try. We leave tonight, those who don't. He shrugged. May the God you choose protect you. The debate continued through the morning. Some families chose to seek relatives in distant towns. Others, mostly the eldest, decided to throw themselves on the mercy of the reservation system. But a core remained those with nowhere else to go, those who believed in Crow's promise of sanctuary. Maggie found him later, standing in the chapel ruins. Charred beams formed crosses against the sky, mockingly devotional. You're sure about this? She asked. These cliff dwellings? I spent a winter there once, running from the school. He kicked at a piece of melted silver, once a candlestick. It's hard living, but living nonetheless. And after we can't hide in ancient ruins forever. Can't we? He turned to her, eyes holding depth she was still learning to read. Maybe it's time to stop trying to fit into their world, make our own instead. A pipe dream. So was a mission teaching Apache children alongside Mexican and white. Yet Antonio built it. He pulled her close, uncaring who might see. We could build something too, away from Blackwoods and regulations and proper society's judgment. Unless you've changed your mind about choosing the risk. She answered by kissing him, tasting smoke and determination. When they parted, she said, I'll need to pack the books Rose saved. Can't have a community without education. Practical woman. But his smile held warmth. My grandmother would definitely have liked you. The day passed in fevered preparation. What animals survived were loaded with salvaged supplies. Children were organized into travel groups, the strongest paired with the weakest. Maps were sketched from Crow's memory, backup routes planned. As darkness fell, Captain Blackwood arrived. He came with only Morrison and 2 others, not enough for a rest, just enough for gloating. His uniform remained pristine as he surveyed the destruction. Tragic, he said, not trying to hide his satisfaction. These old buildings, so susceptible to accident. Murder. Padre Antonio said quietly. You murdered our home. Prove it. Blackwood's smile was reptilian. Though I suppose that's difficult when all your records burned. No proof this place ever existed officially. He focused on Crow. Running again, savage. It's what your kind does best. Surviving. Crow corrected. It's what we do best, despite your kind's efforts. For now. Blackwood moved closer, voice dropping. But I'll find you. Wherever you rats scurry, I'll find you, and next time, I won't stop at buildings. Captain. Morrison's voice held warning. We should go. The townspeople. Our sheep. They'll believe what they're told. But Blackwood mounted his horse. Enjoy your exodus. Moses. He called to Padre Antonio. Let's see if your God parts the desert for you. They watched him ride away, each thinking dark thoughts about justice and vengeance. We leave in an hour. Crow announced. Those coming, make final preparations. Those staying, his voice caught. Vaya con Dios. The farewells were tearful. Families split between safety and loyalty. Sister Catherine surprised everyone by announcing she would come. Someone needs to keep you heathens honest. Even more surprising was Padre Antonio's decision. My place is with my flock, he said simply, wherever they wander. As the moon rose, their ragged caravan formed 43 souls, Apache, Mexican, white, and mixed, united by loss and hope. The children were quiet, understanding this was no adventure but another displacement in lives already too familiar with leaving. Maggie walked beside Crow as he led them into the darkness. Behind them, the mission's ruin stood skeletal against stars. Ahead lay unknown terrain and uncertain futures. Scared, he asked softly. Terrified? She shifted the pack containing precious books. But not alone. No, he agreed. Not alone. They'd gone perhaps a mile when the singing started. Rose's young voice, soon joined by others, Apache traveling songs mixed with Mexican ballads and Christian hymns. A harmony that should have been discordant but somehow worked. Listen, Crow said. That's what Blackwood can't burn. What he'll never understand. The song grew stronger as more voices joined. Even the babies seemed to quiet, lulled by communal rhythm. They sang of rivers and mountains, of losses and findings, of gods both ancient and modern who watched over wandering children. When Maggie added her voice, an Irish lament her grandmother had taught her, Crow squeezed her hand. What do the words mean? That home isn't a place, but the people who claim you. She looked at their ragtag group, illuminated by moonlight and determination. That love builds stronger walls than stone. Behind them, a red glow suggested their abandoned buildings had reignited Blackwood, making sure nothing remained. But ahead, the desert opened like possibility, and ancient dwellings waited to shelter new dreams. 5 days, Crow said. Can your eastern feet manage? My feet are becoming desert feet. She smiled, despite everything. Tough and stubborn and going wherever you go. Even to sacred caves where spirits dwell. Especially there, someone needs to teach those spirit children proper grammar. His laugh rang across the desert, startling a nighthawk into flight. Around them, their makeshift family pressed on, each step taking them further from the world that rejected them and closer to something yet undefined but thoroughly theirs. Sister Catherine began a new song, something about wandering in wilderness until finding promised lands. Padre Antonio added verses in Latin. The children improvised harmonies that would have horrified proper choir masters, but perfectly suited their pilgrimage. As dawn approached, they made camp in a cluster of rocks. The youngest were already asleep on their feet, carried by older siblings or adopted aunts. Crow organized watches while Maggie and Sister Catherine tended blistered feet and weary spirits. "Think we'll make it?" David asked, trying to sound older than his years. "We've made it this far," Maggie told him. "Further than Blackwood believed we could." "That's not really an answer." "No," she agreed, "but it's the only one I have." Later, as the camp settled into exhausted sleep, she found Crow standing watch on a high boulder. The rising sun painted the desert in shades of rose and gold, beautiful despite their circumstances. "No regrets?" he asked. "None." She leaned against him, feeling his solid warmth. "You—" "Only that I didn't burn Blackwood's house while he slept in it." "That's not very Christian of you." "Good thing I'm Apache, then." But his arm came around her, protective and claiming. "We'll make this work. Maggie, build something even Blackwood can't destroy." "Promise." "I promise to try, to fight, to stand between our people and anyone who threatens them." He pressed his lips to her hair. "And to hold you through whatever comes, through the night, through all the nights, until the last star falls." Below them, their people slept dreams of ancient caves and new beginnings mixing with nightmares of flames and loss. Tomorrow would bring more walking, more challenges, more tests of their fragile unity. But for this moment, as desert dawn broke over their exodus, hope lived in the space between an Apache warrior and an Irish teacher, between what was lost and what might yet be found. The cliff dwellings waited, patient as they'd waited for centuries. And perhaps, just perhaps, the spirits would welcome these new refugees, understanding that sometimes the sacred shelters the scarred, and that family forms in the most unexpected ways. 5 days to sanctuary, 5 days to find out if dreams could take root in stone and stars. The journey toward home, whatever form it took, continued. The war cry shattered the pre-dawn quiet like glass against stone. Maggie jerked awake to find chaos erupting through their cliff-dwelling sanctuary. After 3 weeks of peace in the ancient homes, Blackwood had found them. "To the upper caves!" Crow shouted, already moving. "Take the children up!" Gunfire echoed off canyon walls as blue uniforms poured through the narrow entrance. They'd come in darkness, scaling the cliffs like spiders, turning the refugees' defensive advantage into a trap. Maggie grabbed Rose and 2 younger children, pushing them toward the carved handholds that led to higher chambers. Around her, their small community scrambled for safety. Sister Catherine herded a group of girls, her prayers mixing with Apache war songs and Spanish curses. "Where's Padre Antonio?" Maggie called. "The prayer chamber," someone answered. "He won't leave the altar." More soldiers appeared on the opposite rim, rifles trained downward. Blackwood had brought 2 full companies this time, no more pretense of legal authority, just overwhelming force. Crow and the older boys had grabbed what weapons they had: hunting bows, a few old rifles, knives meant for cooking, not combat. David stood among them, trying to look brave despite his shaking hands. "You're not fighting," Maggie told him fiercely. "Get the little ones to safety." "But Samuel needs you alive." She pushed him toward the climbing holds. "Go!" The first wave of soldiers reached the main plaza. Crow met them with desperate fury, his knife flashing in the growing light. 2 men fell before rifles drove him back. Blood ran down his arm, his or theirs. Maggie couldn't tell. "Margaret O'Brien," Blackwood's voice boomed across the canyon. "Show yourself, and I'll spare the children." "Don't listen," Crow shouted. He lies like he breathes. But Maggie was already moving. If her surrender could buy time for the others to escape through the back passages Crow had shown them. She emerged onto a narrow ledge, hands raised, below. Blackwood sat his horse like a conquering general. Clean uniform, obscene against the carnage. "Ah, the Irish whore shows herself," he called. "Tell your savage to surrender, and perhaps I'll show mercy." "Your word means nothing," she replied. "You burned children from their beds. I burned a nest of sedition. Now I'm cleaning up the survivors." He gestured to his men. "Sergeant Morrison, if the Apache doesn't appear in 30 seconds, start with the youngest prisoners." "No." But even as Maggie protested, she saw soldiers dragging captured children into view. Maria, barely 6, sobbed in a corporal's grip. Crow appeared beside her, breathing hard. "Blackwood, your fight's with me." "My fight is with the very idea of you," Blackwood replied. "Savages playing at civilization, whites who forget their place, the mixing of blood that weakens our race." Big words from a man who needs 2 companies to fight farmers and children. Crow called back. Blackwood's face darkened. "Bring them down." What followed was nightmare made real. Soldiers swarmed the cliff dwellings, overwhelming defenders through sheer numbers. Padre Antonio was dragged from his prayers. Sister Catherine fought like a wildcat until a rifle butt dropped her. One by one, the refugees were forced into the canyon floor. But not all. Through the chaos, Maggie glimpsed shadows slipping away through hidden exits, some of the children escaping with Apache mothers who knew these canyons like their own hearts. At least a few would survive. In the plaza, Blackwood organized his captives with military efficiency. The wounded were separated. No use wasting medical supplies on those who'll hang anyway. Children huddled together, some silent with shock, others crying for parents who couldn't answer. "Impressive," Blackwood said, surveying the ancient dwellings. "I can see why you thought to hide here, but you forget I studied Apache tactics at West Point, including their rat holes." He produced a familiar bottle, kerosene. "No." Padre Antonio struggled against his captors. "These are sacred places, historical treasures. They're contaminated, like everything you savages touch." Blackwood handed the bottle to Morrison. "Burn it all." "Captain," Morrison hesitated. "There might still be people inside, children." "Then they'll serve as examples." Blackwood's smile was death. "Do it." That's when the desert itself seemed to rise in anger. The war cry came from everywhere at once, the canyon rims, the hidden valleys, even from beneath the sand itself. Apache warriors materialized like ghosts of vengeance, and at their head rode a figure from legend. "Geronimo," someone breathed. The great war chief had come with 50 fighters, not many against 2 companies. But these were Apache in their element. They struck like lightning, vanished like smoke, struck again from new angles. "Form squares," Blackwood screamed. "Defensive positions." But his men were scattered through the dwellings, caught between fire and fury. The refugees, sensing opportunity, turned on their captors. Crow had Morrison down, knife at his throat. Sister Catherine had recovered and was wielding a soldier's own rifle with surprising skill. Maggie found herself face to face with Blackwood. He'd drawn his saber, that same blade that had once tasted Crow's blood. "You brought this on yourself," he snarled. "All of it. If you just accepted your place." "Our place is wherever we choose to stand," she replied, surprising herself with her steadiness. "And we choose here." He lunged. Maggie dodged, her desert-trained reflexes saving her. Around them, battle raged Apache war cries mixing with army bugles, ancient stone drinking modern blood. Then Crow was there, intercepting Blackwood's next strike. The 2 men circled each other while chaos swirled around them. "This time we finish it," Blackwood promised. "Yes," Crow agreed. "We do." They came together in a clash of steel and fury. Blackwood had reach and training, but Crow had desperation and home ground. The captain pressed hard, driving Crow toward the plaza's edge where a 50-foot drop waited. "Watch out!" Maggie screamed. Crow twisted at the last second, using Blackwood's momentum against him. For a heartbeat, the captain teetered on the brink. His eyes met Maggie's shock, replacing arrogance. Then he fell, his scream cut short by unforgiving stone. The battle turned, leaderless, caught between Apache attackers and desperate refugees. The soldiers began to retreat. Some threw down weapons, others fled into the desert where Geronimo's warriors waited. When the dust settled, the cost was terrible. 8 of their community dead, including 2 children caught in crossfire, many more wounded. The ancient dwellings bore new scars, bullet holes in 1,000-year-old walls, blood on sacred stones. But they had survived. Geronimo himself stood in the plaza, studying the mixed group of survivors. His eyes found Crow, took in Maggie standing beside him. "You fight well for one who lived with whites," he said in Apache. "I fight for family." Crow replied in the same language. "As you taught." "Family." Geronimo looked at the children Apache. Mexican, white, clinging to each other. "Strange family. Strange times." The war chief nodded slowly. "The soldiers will return. More each time. This place is no longer safe." "Where is Crow?" asked bitterly. "Mexico. My people camp 3 days south. Those who wish may come." His gaze included everyone. All who stood together today. It was an extraordinary offer sanctuary with the most wanted man in the territory. Some would call it joining outlaws. Others might call it finding freedom. "We need time to decide," Padre Antonio said. The priest looked older, worn by violence and loss. "Decide quickly. I leave at sunset." Geronimo moved toward his horse, then paused. "The white woman. She has warrior spirit. You chose well." Samuel Crow walking. After the Apache melted back into the desert, the survivors faced hard choices. Some, exhausted by running, chose to return to whatever remained of reservation life. Others, mostly those with Mexican connections, would try for towns where they might disappear. But the core, those bound by more than circumstance, gathered around Crow and Padre Antonio. "Mexico," Sister Catherine said thoughtfully. "I suppose God's work knows no borders." "It's exile," the priest warned. "Permanent. We can never return." "Return to what?" David asked. His innocence had died today, replaced by grim understanding. "They'll always hunt us here." Rose tugged Maggie's skirt. "Will you come to Mexico?" Maggie looked at Crow, saw her answer in his eyes. "Yes, little one, we'll come. All of us together. All who choose it." As sunset approached, they prepared once more. This time they carried their dead wrapped in Apache tradition, blessed with Catholic rites, mourned in 3 languages. The ancient dwellings would serve as tomb as well as former shelter. 27 chose Mexico. They stood in the plaza as Geronimo's warriors returned, bringing horses and supplies. It was real now. They were leaving the United States, choosing exile over extermination. "Regrets?" Crow asked Maggie as they mounted a spotted mare together. "None. You." "I regret not killing Blackwood years ago. Would have saved lives. Would have made you like him. Better this way." She leaned back against his chest. "He fell fighting. We rise together." Padre Antonio blessed their departure while Sister Catherine led a hymn. Then they were moving, following Geronimo's people into the gathering darkness. Behind them, the cliff dwelling stood empty again, waiting for the next refugees history would drive to their shelter. They traveled through the night, stars their only witnesses. At dawn, they paused at a rise overlooking the border, that invisible line that meant so much and so little. "Last chance," Geronimo told them. "Cross this, you're outlaws forever in American eyes." "We were outlaws the moment we chose each other," Maggie said, surprising everyone by speaking. At least in Mexico, we can be honest outlaws. Even the stern war chief smiled at that. They crossed together Apache and Mexican and Irish, Catholic and traditional, young and old, a family forged in fire, tested by hate, choosing hope despite all reasons not to. 3 days later, they reached Geronimo's camp in the Sierra Madre. It was hard living tents in caves, constant vigilance, freedom paid for in comfort, but the children could play without fear. Mixed couples could walk together without shame, and slowly, carefully, they began to build again. Maggie started a school under an ancient oak. Crow trained young men in survival skills, both Apache and modern. Padre Antonio built a small chapel that welcomed all faiths. Sister Catherine became the camp's healer, learning Apache medicine to complement her training. "Think it will last?" Maggie asked one evening, watching their strange community share a meal. "Nothing lasts," Crow said. "But maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe it just needs to be, for as long as it can." Wise words from a warrior. Wise words from a grandmother, passed through a warrior to a teacher. He pulled her close. "We made it. Margaret Mary, against all odds. To Mexico. To each other. The rest is just geography." Under stars that belonged to no nation, their community sang Apache songs and Irish ballads, Mexican corridos and Christian hymns. The music rose like incense, blessing their exile, sanctifying their choice. Somewhere to the north, new Captain Blackwoods would rise, preaching hate and separation. But here, in this moment, love had won a small victory. Different peoples had chosen each other over the world's divisions. It wasn't the ending Maggie had imagined when she'd boarded a train to meet Thomas. It wasn't the life Crow had foreseen when soldiers burned his childhood. But it was theirs earned in blood and tears, held together by bonds stronger than law or prejudice. "No regrets," she whispered into the darkness. "No regrets," he agreed. "Only tomorrow." And tomorrow, despite everything, seemed suddenly possible. The Sierra Madre morning mist clung to pine branches like promises waiting to be kept. 6 months had passed since their exodus, and the refugee community had grown roots in Mexican soil. Maggie stood before her makeshift classroom, a clearing beneath ancient oaks, watching her students arrive for morning lessons. "Buenos dias, Señora Maggie," they called, using the title that had evolved naturally. Not Miss, for she was no longer the abandoned bride. Not Mrs., for she and Crow had not formalized their bond in any church. Simply Señora, a woman of respect in their small world. "Good morning, children. Today we practice both English and Spanish letters. Rose, will you help the younger ones?" The girl beamed. At 11, she'd become Maggie's assistant, translating between languages with fluid ease. The transformation from the solemn child at San Felipe to this confident young woman filled Maggie's heart. "Samuel's back!" David burst into the clearing, breathless from running. The hunting party returned. Maggie's pulse quickened, as it always did. Each time Crow left with Geronimo's warriors hunting for food or scouting for threats, she held her breath until his return. The Mexican authorities tolerated their presence, but American bounty hunters sometimes crossed borders seeking Apache scalps. She maintained composure through the lesson, but when the children scattered for midday meal, she walked quickly toward the central camp. There he was, unloading venison from a pack horse, whole and safe and hers. "4 deer," he said without looking up, though she knew he'd sensed her approach. "Should keep us fed for a week." "Any trouble?" "Tracks of shod horses 2 valleys over. American-made shoes." He finally met her eyes. "They're getting bolder. Or more desperate. The new fort commander has doubled the bounties." "Colonel Mitchell." Crow spat the name. "Makes Blackwood look reasonable." They'd received news through Mexican traders the scandal of Blackwood's death, and the mission burning had forced military restructuring. The new commander was worse a veteran of the Indian Wars who saw extermination as holy duty. Padre Antonio wants a community meeting tonight, Maggie said. Sister Catherine says it's important. Crow nodded, but his attention had shifted. You look pale. Have you been sick? The morning mist affects me strangely lately. She changed the subject quickly. How is Geronimo? Planning, always planning. He knows this peace can't last. Crow touched her cheek. Neither can ours. Why must you always expect ending? Because I've lived through too many. Buddy smiled, softening the words. Though you've taught me some things endure. That evening, the community gathered around the central fire. 27 had become 32, as other refugees found them a Buffalo soldier who'd refused orders to massacre civilians, a Chinese railroad worker fleeing debt bondage, 2 Irish sisters escaping forced servitude. We are growing. Padre Antonio began. This is both blessing and challenge. More mouths need more food. More people increase chances of discovery. We could move deeper into the mountains, someone suggested, or split into smaller groups. Another offered. No. Sister Catherine stood, her weathered face grave. Before we decide such things, there's news to share, joyful news that changes everything. She looked directly at Maggie. Tell them, child. Heat flooded Maggie's face. She'd confided in the nun just that morning, seeking medical confirmation of what her body already knew. She felt Crow go still beside her. We're going to have a child, in spring. The silence stretched heartbeat long, then erupted in celebration. In their precarious world, new life was hope made flesh. Women surrounded Maggie with congratulations while men clapped Crow's shoulder. But she saw the storm in his eyes. Later, in their small shelter, a cave improved with wooden walls, he paced like a trapped wolf. Why didn't you tell me first? I wasn't certain, and you were gone. A child, Maggie, here, in this. He gestured at their rough surroundings. What kind of life is that? The kind we make it. She caught his hands, stilled his movement. Our child will know freedom, community, love without boundaries. Our child will know running, hiding, never belonging anywhere. Like us. Exactly like us. The pain in his voice cut deep. I've lost one family. I can't. You won't. She pressed his palm to her still flat stomach. This child is addition, not replacement. Hope, not ending. He dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her belly. How can you be so certain? Because I choose to be. Because dwelling in fear steals joy from present. She stroked his hair. Because this child was conceived in love, not duty or desperation. When he looked up, tears tracked his cheeks, the first she'd seen from him. A child. Our child. Apache and Irish. Imagine the stubbornness. That surprised a laugh from him. Heaven help us. Heaven already has. Why else would we find each other? They held each other as night deepened, planning quietly. Names if a boy. Names if a girl. How to blend their traditions, whether the child would have his cheekbones or her green eyes. But morning brought harsh reality. Riders coming! The sentry's call shattered dawn peace. Many riders. The camp exploded into practiced motion. Children to hiding places, weapons distributed, elderly and pregnant women to the caves, including Maggie, despite her protests. Not this time, Crow said firmly. Not anymore. From the cave mouth, she watched riders approach. Not American military, their uniforms were Mexican, but their manners suggested official business. Geronimo met them with Padre Antonio, translating. The conversation carried on wind. Son, orders from Mexico City. Apache raids in Sonora. Then must relocate or face consequences. Maggie's heart sank. Even here, politics reached for them. The meeting lasted hours. When Geronimo returned, his face was carved from stone. The Mexican government grows fearful. American pressure, their own ranchers complaining. We have 1 month to move deeper south or be forced onto their reservations. Reservations? Sister Catherine laughed bitterly. Different country, same cages. What about those of us who aren't Apache? The buffalo soldier asked. Guilty by association. Geronimo's smile held no humor. In their eyes, you've chosen to become Apache, so Apache justice you receive. That night, debates raged. Some wanted to comply, seeking legal residence in southern Mexico. Others spoke of Guatemala, where government reach was weaker. A few suggested returning to America, taking chances with Colonel Mitchell over unknown southern dangers. What do you think? Maggie asked Crow as they lay together, his hand protective over her belly. I think nowhere is safe for long, but... He paused. There's something else. A possibility. Tell me. Geronimo has contacts, ship captains who owe him favors. There's talk of islands Cuba, Jamaica, places where mixed people are common, where our child could grow without carrying parents' crimes. Ocean. Maggie had never seen the sea. You're talking about crossing water. I'm talking about crossing worlds, finding somewhere government documents don't define us. His voice dropped. Somewhere a child could use their real name. It's so far, so uncertain. Everything's uncertain, but islands don't have cavalry, don't have borders to cross and recross. She considered it trading desert for ocean, mountains for beaches, known dangers for foreign possibilities. The others would come. Some Padre Antonio speaks of mission work among islanders. Sister Catherine mentions hospitals needing skilled healers. The children. He shrugged. Children adapt. When would we leave? Ship comes to Veracruz next month. Geronimo could arrange passage. And you can Apache warriors become island fishermen? Can Irish teachers become mothers in exile? I suppose we'll learn together. The decision rippled through camp over following days. Some chose southern Mexican mountains, others, exhausted by running, decided on Mexican reservations despite the cost. But a core group, their strange family, chose the sea. Geronimo himself would stay, fighting until the end, but he blessed their departure. The warrior's path isn't the only honorable one. He told Crow, sometimes survival is victory. They prepared through blazing summer. Maggie taught navigation basics. Having the children chart stars they'd use at sea, Sister Catherine gathered medical supplies. Knowing island diseases differed from desert ailments. Padre Antonio prayed in 3 languages, seeking divine blessing on their newest exodus. The journey to Veracruz was itself an odyssey. Pregnant women, elderly priests, children of mixed heritage, they looked like war refugees because they were. Mexican villages sometimes helped, sometimes turned them away. But step by step, mile by mile, they moved toward the coast. Maggie's first glimpse of ocean stole her breath. Endless blue stretching to forever. Nothing like the finite borders of desert and mountain. Beside her, Crow stood equally transfixed. Water everywhere, he murmured. My grandmother told stories of the early times, when Apache lived by different waters. Maybe we're returning to something ancient. Or creating something new. The ship, a merchant vessel whose captain owed Geronimo for saving his brother, waited in port. Not large, but large enough for 33 souls seeking new horizons. Cuba first, the captain explained through Padre Antonio. Then, whoever wants Jamaica, other islands. I can't promise paradise. We're not seeking paradise, Sister Catherine replied. Just a place to breathe free. Loading took all day. Their possessions were few but precious books salvaged from fire, tools for building, seeds for planting. Rose clutched the journal where she recorded everyone's stories, determined to preserve their history. As sunset approached, Maggie stood at the rail, watching Mexico's mountains fade. Crow joined her, wrapping strong arms around her expanding waist. Afraid, he asked. Terrified, excited, hopeful. She leaned into him. You. All of that, plus seasick already. She laughed. The mighty Apache warrior, defeated by waves. Desert people aren't meant for water. But he smiled. Good thing I have an island woman to teach me. Irish island. Different ocean. Ocean is ocean. Love is love. We'll manage. The ship's horn sounded. Last calls for boarding echoed. Their family gathered at the rail Apache and Mexican and Irish and more, bound by choice rather than blood. Padre Antonio led a prayer as moorings were cast off. Sister Catherine started a hymn that became a traveling song that became something entirely new. The children added verses about flying over water, about fish instead of rabbits, about homes that floated until they found land. As full dark fell, Maggie felt the child move within her the first quickening, like butterfly wings against her ribs. She gasped, grabbing Crow's hand to share the miracle. Strong already, he said, wonder in his voice. Fighter like the mother. Wanderer like the father. Maybe both, maybe neither, maybe something we can't imagine yet. The Mexican coast disappeared into darkness. Ahead lay open ocean and uncertainty. But for the first time in memory, uncertainty felt like possibility rather than threat. I've been thinking about names, Maggie said. If it's a girl, Hope, Esperanza, for all languages. And a boy, Samuel Francisco, for you and for journeys ending in safe harbors. Every harbor's temporary. Maggie, haven't I taught you that? Then we'll name him for the journey itself. Let destinations take care of themselves. They stood together as the ship found its rhythm, their small community settling for the voyage. Some were seasick, some were praying, some were singing. All were choosing tomorrow over yesterday. Possibility over certainty. No regrets, Crow asked, their old ritual. Only forward, Maggie replied, changing the words. Only hope. The stars wheeled overhead, same stars that blessed desert wanderings now witnessing ocean passages. Somewhere ahead lay islands where their child might grow free, where their family might plant new roots in foreign soil. Behind them, Mexico slept. Further still, America dreamed its manifest destiny dreams, but on this ship, in this moment, 33 souls claimed a different destiny, one measured not in conquered territories, but in hearts choosing love over law, community over country. The ocean sang its ancient song. The wind carried them toward dawn, and deep within Maggie's womb, the future kicked again, impatient to be born into whatever world its parents' courage could create. The Caribbean dawn painted the sky in shades of coral and gold as Maggie stood on the cliff overlooking the sea. 5 years had passed since their ship had found harbor in this small cove on Jamaica's northern coast. 5 years of building, growing, becoming. Mama, look! A small voice called from below. I caught a crab. She smiled down at her daughter, Hope Esperanza Crow-walking O'Brien, though the islanders simply called her SB, 4 years old with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes. She was a child of two worlds who belonged fully to this new one. Careful, little fish, Crow called, wading in after her. Remember what I taught you about the claws? I know. Papa, hold them from behind, like catching scorpions. Maggie laughed at how naturally her daughter compared island creatures to desert ones she'd never seen. Stories had become their inheritance, passed down like precious jewels. Their community had scattered across several islands, but a core remained here in Sanctuary Cove, the name they'd given their small settlement. 15 souls who'd chosen to continue their experiment in family beyond blood. Letter from Rose. David came running up the path. Now a young man of 19 who helped run their small trading post. She's coming to visit from Kingston. Rose had found work as a translator in Jamaica's capital. Her gift for languages opening doors none of them had imagined. But she returned regularly, drawn back to the only real family she'd known. Maggie read the letter aloud at evening meal, their community gathering as always to share food and news. Rose wrote of city life, of political changes, of a young merchant named William who'd been courting her properly. "A Chinese-Jamaican man," she wrote. "Like us, he belongs to many places and none. You would approve. Senora Maggie, he sees me true. Our little Rose, grown and choosing love," Sister Catherine said warmly. The nun had adapted to island life, running a small clinic that served locals regardless of payment ability. Time moves strangely here. All time moves strangely. Padre Antonio added, nearly 70 now. He led services in a chapel built from driftwood and dreams, but island time moves sideways. They laughed, understanding. Here, urgency had softened. The desperate edge of survival had gentled into rhythms of tide and season. They were still exiles, but exile had become home. After dinner, Crow and Maggie walked the beach while Espy played with other children, a mix of their original group's offspring and local kids who'd adopted them. The divisions that had defined their former lives meant little here. "Rose writes something else," Maggie said quietly. "News from America. Colonel Mitchell was court-martialed. Excessive brutality even by Army standards. Good. Maybe his replacement will be human." "She also says," Maggie hesitated, "the Apache wars are ending. Geronimo surrendered." Crow stopped walking. In 5 years, he'd rarely spoken of the warrior who'd saved them, but Maggie knew he carried that weight survivor's guilt mixed with gratitude. He knew it would come. Crow said finally, "Probably why he sent us away. One less group to mourn. You couldn't have changed anything by staying." "No, but sometimes the heart doesn't understand what the mind knows." He pulled her close. "Though if I'd stayed, I'd have missed this. You, Espy, this strange peace we've built." "Worth it. Worth everything." They walked on, but Maggie sensed a shift in him. Later, as Espy slept between them in their small house, she still crept into their bed during thunderstorms. Crow spoke into the darkness. "I've been thinking about teaching Espy more, about who we were, where we came from. She knows the stories. Stories aren't the same as living memory. She should learn Apache ways properly. Irish traditions too, not just the fragments we remember when prompted." "What are you suggesting?" "A school. Real school. Not just your morning lessons, but something formal, documented. So our children can point to something and say, 'This is my heritage.'" Maggie felt tears slip free. Yes, let's do that." They began planning the next day. Wording spread through Sanctuary Cove and beyond. Other mixed families responded with enthusiasm: Chinese-African couples, Spanish indigenous unions, combinations that would have caused riots in their former homes, but here simply meant neighbors. The Sanctuary School opened 6 months later in a building raised by community effort. Maggie taught literature and mathematics. Crow taught survival skills and cultural history. Sister Catherine added medicine. Padre Antonio contributed philosophy. Even locals joined, trading knowledge of fishing and farming for literacy and languages. "We're creating something new," David said one evening, helping to paint a mural on the school wall. Images from all their heritages blended together: Apache eagles soaring over Celtic knots, African patterns framing Chinese dragons, Mexican flowers growing from Jamaican soil. "Not new," Crow corrected. "Old. Before borders and blood purity. When people were just people." "Idealist," Maggie teased. "When did my cynical warrior become a philosopher? When his daughter asked why she couldn't visit grandmother's grave? When I had to explain about borders and hate and how love isn't always enough?" His voice roughened. "But maybe here, for her, it can be." Rose arrived for the school's official opening, bringing her William, who was indeed everything her letters promised: kind, intelligent, and completely devoted to their brilliant translator. Watching them together, Maggie saw echoes of her own journey from abandonment to belonging. "Do you think we'd have come together without the pain?" Rose asked. holding Espy while the child braided flowers in her hair. If the world had been kinder, would we have found each other? Maybe not, Maggie admitted. But I can't wish away the path that brought us here. Even the platform, the abandonment. Especially that, without it, no Crow, no Espy, no this. The opening ceremony blended traditions like everything in their community. Padre Antonio blessed in Latin. Crow sang in Apache. Local drummers added African rhythms. The children performed Irish step dancing to a Chinese melody. It should have been chaos. Instead, it was harmony. My grandmother would be confused. Crow whispered to Maggie, but I think, proud, that her story survived in some form. All our grandmothers would be confused, and proud, and probably arguing about the proper way to make bread. Espy asked yesterday if we could visit America, see where we came from. Maggie's heart clenched. What did you say? That someday, when the world is ready for children like her, when loving across boundaries isn't a crime but a celebration. You think that day will come? Look around us. He gestured at their mixed gathering. It's already here, just in small pockets, hidden corners, but growing. The sun set over their celebration, painting the sea in impossible colors. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Hurricane season was approaching, and rumors spoke of political changes that might affect their quiet existence. But tonight, they had this community, purpose, and the fierce love that had carried them across desert and ocean to this moment. Later, as guests departed and children were tucked into beds, Maggie found herself again on the cliff where she'd started her day. But now, Crow was beside her, their hands entwined, watching stars emerge over water. Remember that first night, she asked, under the platform? When you asked if I'd stay until morning. And now I'll stay until the stars fall into the sea. He kissed her temple. Longer if you need it. I'll always need it, need you, this life we've built. Below them, Sanctuary Cove settled into sleep. The school stood ready for tomorrow's lessons. Gardens waited for dawn watering. The chapel held space for all forms of prayer. And in small houses, children dreamed in multiple languages, their heritage a bridge rather than a burden. I want to add something to the school, Maggie said suddenly. A motto, something about choosing love over law. Where love leads, we follow, Crow suggested. Beyond borders, beneath stars, we choose each other. Perfect. Espy can paint it. She's getting good with letters. They stood together as night deepened. No longer exiles, but architects of something unprecedented. Not perfect perfection was for fairy tales, but real, vital, and thoroughly theirs. In the morning, Espy would wake demanding stories of eagles and railways. Rose would begin teaching at the school. New families would arrive seeking what they'd built. The work of creating sanctuary would continue. But for now, in this suspended moment between one day and the next, Margaret Mary O'Brien and Samuel Crow Walking held each other on a Caribbean cliff. Their love a testament to the power of choosing hope over fear, community over conformity, and always, each other over everything else the world tried to tell them they should be. The stars wheeled overhead, same stars that had witnessed a crying woman on a train platform, a wounded warrior offering water, a dangerous journey through desert and flame, an ocean crossing toward uncertain futures. Now those stars blessed what all that pain had purchased, a place where their daughter could grow up knowing she was loved, not despite her mixed heritage, but because of it. A place where broken people had built something whole. No regrets, Crow asked, their old ritual transformed by time into a prayer of gratitude. Only joy, Maggie answered. Only this, only us. The ocean sang its ancient song, different from desert wind, but carrying the same promise: tomorrow comes for those brave enough to greet it. And they would greet it together, this strange and beautiful family, proof that love could indeed build stronger walls than stone. In the end, They'd traveled further than miles could measure, from abandonment to abundance, from exile to sanctuary, from solitary sorrow to communal joy. The journey had been worth every difficult step, and it was far from over. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where in the world you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts about this tale of love transcending boundaries. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night and hit the like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more people discover this story. Your support means everything.